Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Let me get organized here. Alderman Hayes.
Here.
Alderman Kirkwood. Present. Alderman Mosio. Here. Alderman Seeger.
Present.
Mayor Taylor.
Present.
You have a quorum, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So this evening we have 3 items on the agenda. Should we do a presentation first and then we'll bring the resolutions up? Okay. Okay. Corporate Counsel is going to go ahead and do a presentation for us.
AV, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the possibility of putting one or more referenda on the ballot for the next consolidated election to convert the city from its current mayor-council form of government to a managerial form of government. This is a legal process which is mandated by the state. It is a process that would involve binding referenda. So these would not be an advisory referenda where it's just the opinion of the people and the elected officials can leave or take it as they choose. This would be an actual change in the form of government that would be effectuated by the people. First off, I'm going to explain, and we have discussed this before, a little bit about what the city's current form of government is and how that would change if we moved from the current form to a managerial form of government. A lot of people refer to Waukegan's form of government as a strong mayor form of government. That, as far as we can tell, is incorrect. Waukegan functions under a very traditional form of mayor-council government, which is governed by Article 3.1 of the Illinois Municipal Code. What that means is that, and we'll talk about that in 1 minute, but it would be moving from Article 3.1 to Article 5. Basically, a whole different body of law would govern how the city is actually run. If a city manager were to be appointed, the executive and administrative responsibilities would be transferred to a professional, non-political city manager who would be hired and could be fired by the city council. The city manager's responsibilities would be day-to-day management of all executive and administrative functions of the city. They would hire and could also fire department heads unless otherwise provided by law. Fire chiefs and police chiefs have a different way of being appointed, but in general, that would be handled by the city manager. The city manager would also be responsible for putting together the annual budget in cooperation with the finance department and also a capital plan. But the key thing is that the day-to-day operations of the city would rest with a professional manager, not an elected official. The mayor and city council would retain all legislative authority, and most importantly, they would have the ability, as I said before, to hire and fire the city manager. Okay, so what does it mean to change your form of government? As I said before, it means shifting from one article in the Illinois Municipal Code, which talks about how officers can be elected, what their powers are, and all that, to another article. The city council, if you want to change your form of government, it can only be done by referenda. And referendums can be brought to the ballot by 2 ways. One, the city council can adopt a resolution asking that the referendum be placed on the ballot. Or 2, there can be a citizen petition to do it. Tonight we're talking about the city council taking action. I'm not going to get into a citizen-initiated referendum because I didn't bother to look that up and get current on it. All right, so changes to the form of government can only be considered at elections where all of the residents of a municipality can vote. So what that means is it cannot actually be considered at a primary election. These referenda that we'll be talking tonight cannot go on the ballot for the February primary because there may not be a primary for one particular ward. There may not be a primary for one particular party. Democrats might have a primary, Republicans might not. Independents wouldn't be able to vote at that time, so it has to be during the general election. The next general election after November, already too late to put this on the November ballot, the next general election is the April 4th, 2023 consolidated election. That is the election where we're going to have all of the aldermen up for re-election, or all of the wards, the aldermen, all of the aldermen representing the wards, all those seats will be open. Okay, as I said, we're currently governed by Article 3.1 of the Municipal Code, traditionally the mayor-council form of government. What does that mean? For us, it means that we have a mayor, we have 9 alderpersons, 1 for each ward. We actually got very, very close in the last census, within 700 residents to getting a 10th ward, but that didn't quite happen. And so the next time that could possibly happen is if we go above 90,000 in the 2030 decennial census. So we have 9 alderpersons, 1 from each ward. They serve concurrent 4-year terms, and the mayor, clerk, and treasurer are elected for 4-year terms in the aldermanic election, in the alternating aldermanic election, which would be happening in 2 years from now. Okay, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Article 5, in addition to having a city manager, has a setup for the elected officials, where the default is that there are 6 alderpersons who are elected at large, and they're elected for 4-year staggered terms. So 3 would be elected at the same time as the mayor, clerk, and treasurer, 3 in an off-year elections. Are we stuck with that? No, we're not stuck with that. But this is where it gets a bit complicated. So we can choose, if the voters choose, to change to the managerial form of government, Article 5. This would be the default unless we put 2 more referenda on the ballot to basically keep things the way they are. And this is why on the agenda tonight you see that there are 3 possible referenda that are being considered. The other interesting thing is that the law says that no changes to the actual election of elected officials would happen until the next election where these folks would be selected. So these changes would not actually kick in until 2027 for the aldermen. You could hire a city council, you could hire a city manager immediately, but the changes to the elected officials wouldn't happen until 2027. All right. Here are the 3 questions that would be required for Waukegan to move to a city manager form of government and keep its wards and only have 1 alderman per ward the way we do right now. All 3 of these would need to appear on the ballot, and they would all need to be approved. The first one, and this is language that comes directly from the Act, we're actually going to put this up on our website too, and so we can also get you a copy too. The first one, this comes straight from the Act, from the law. Shall the city of Waukegan adopt a managerial form of municipal government? Vote yes, vote no. Second one, shall the city of Waukegan, if it adopts a managerial form of municipal government, continue to elect alderpersons from wards? The opposite of electing from wards is electing at large, where basically everybody in the city gets to vote, and the top 3 vote getters would get to be aldermen. It's not the way we do things now. I don't think anybody suggested that we change that. All right, number 3. Shall only 1 alderperson hereafter be elected from each ward if the city of Waukegan adopts a managerial form of municipal government and also elects to continue the alderperson organization of the city council? That's a mouthful. So that basically says that we're only going to have 1 alderperson per ward. At one point in time, previous to 1978 or 1979, Waukegan had 2 alderpersons per ward. So we would need a bigger dais, or people would have to be sitting a lot closer together. I don't think that there's been a lot of interest in doing that. So here's what would happen. If resolutions approving the referendum are adopted by the City Council before January 15th, 2023, then they could go on the ballot for the April consolidated election. The city clerk would take those resolutions, would certify them across the street to the Lake County clerk, and they would appear in the exact format that I just put up on the screen on the April 4th, 2023 ballot. So let's talk about what happens if voters vote yes on all three referenda. They say, yes, we want a city manager. Yes, we love our wards, we love our aldermen, and we want to keep our aldermen the way we are, and we don't want two of them, we think one is good. Then the mayor would then issue a proclamation declaring immediately after certification. So this would be a few weeks after. The clerk says, we've counted the votes, we're certifying this, and the mayor would say, the city is now under the managerial form of government. Now, if you look at our code, we don't have the position of city manager in our code. We would need to amend the code to say that we have a city manager, that that city manager is responsible for the things that we want the city manager to be responsible for. That would need to be adopted by the city council. And then you'd have to go hire somebody. And that search could take some time. We'd have to figure out how to administer the city in the interim. It would probably be the way the city is administered right now. Okay. So now we've got three questions. I'm going to take you through a few hypotheticals here. If the voters vote no on the first question, they say we do not want a city manager. The second and third questions are disregarded. We don't even get to the second and third questions. Everything stays the same. Okay, let's say though the voters say, yes, we want a managerial form of government, but no, we don't want wards. And we don't want to elect alderpersons by wards. Then, after 2027, the city would switch to at-large voting. We would have 6 alderpersons, and we could have a smaller dais, I guess. And then the third question would not be considered. If you get yes on the first two, that yes, we want a manager, yes, we want to retain wards, and they vote no, well then, once again, we're back to having a bigger dais, and we would need to have 18. So those are kind of all the permutations of this. Is this complicated? Yes. Do we have a way to avoid it? No, because this is exactly what the statute tells us we have to do. Why don't we hear about this process? Because most communities that have adopted the managerial format did this decades ago. Did it back in the 70s, probably around the time that Waukegan switched from 18 to 9 aldermen. Actually, they probably went from, did they have 9 at the time? They went from 16 to 8, yeah. Okay. Okay. So regardless of what happens, here's what would not change from these referenda. Terms of the current elected officials and those who would be elected this fall would not change. So mayor, clerk, and treasurer would all continue to serve through the end of their term, through 2025. Anyone who is actually elected this coming April, they would serve a 4-year term through 2027. Can't change people's terms in the middle of their terms. It would not change elected officials' salaries during their current terms of office. That's in the Illinois Constitution, whether you think it's corrupt or whether you think it was a way to basically prevent people from, prevent people from padding their wallets or trying to think of a polite way to get back at their enemies. You can't raise or lower an elected official's salary during their term. And it would also not change the city council's role until the city manager is actually hired. At that point, you would have someone who would take over the day-to-day administration. Okay, that's my presentation. I hope that it made things a little clearer. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, Alderman Florian.
This was great. Thank you for doing this. This makes it all much clearer as to why we have to do what we're doing. Will there be any kind of, I don't know, I guess monetary support from the city to get this information out to the public? So in other words, ways of without politicizing it, right? Like, how do we tell people, okay, this is what you're voting on, and make it clear to people so they understand it, because they're not all going to get to sit through your presentation.
Oh, I was willing to just keep doing this every day if you needed me to. No,
Well, you can come to my house then, and I'll get all my neighbors over.
No, Alderman Florian, you asked a very important question there, because this happens with referenda all the time. When you have like a school district that wants to put out a bond, and they say, well, we're putting out this bond, and obviously they want the bond because they want to expand their budget. You have to be very careful in educating the public about what would or would not happen without saying, we think this is good, we think this is bad. And so, yes, you can spend money to educate the public. You cannot spend money to say, please vote yes on all three, or please vote no. And because that is considered as just as bad as saying, please vote for this candidate for the 10th Ward Alderman. I know there's no 10th Ward, I'm just using that as a hypothetical. We're going to have public comment. I think we're going to have public comment and questions as soon as the aldermen are done. If that's okay, yeah.
So, okay, but you still didn't answer my question, though. So will the city be putting anything out about it, or not?
That would be up to basically you guys.
Okay, and then as an individual, like as an alderman, can I go out and lobby, if you will, my people to say this is what I think you should vote, how I think you should vote on this?
As long as you are careful not to spend city funds or resources using a
I don't
bully.
have access to the city funds or resources.
Well, I mean, there are things that have been like using city council to photocopy flyers,
Okay.
posting things on the city council, on the city's
Do it
website.
from up here.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and you
Now,
can only, like, even if you were engaging with somebody, you can answer questions for somebody on it, but you can't necessarily, like, if they ask you, are you in favor or not, you could say yes or no, but you can't lobby per se for it.
yeah, and we would talk about this, because I think that whether you support this idea or whether you are against this idea, the key is you want the voters to decide, and you don't want this knocked out on a technicality. Yes, Alderman Hayes.
So we want the voters to decide. We also want to make sure that the voters understand, and I think I had to read through this a couple of times to make sure that I understood it, is the language that's being proposed.
So you're saying I didn't write a clear memo?
Is this the only way the language can appear on the referendum?
It has to be very similar, and we're actually working with the Lake County Clerk's Office to make sure that any even slight changes we're making to make it what we think is more readable do not deviate from the intention of the statute, because a lot of times referenda are knocked off the ballot because they're determined not to be clear, or they don't follow what the law actually says they need to say.
And can I just ask one more follow-up question? In terms of counting the votes, so you get someone who votes no and then votes yes and then no. I mean, how does the counting actually work? Is it just the first two that are considered, and if yes, then they go to the next two? Or if there's kind of conflicting votes as
Right.
it relates to these three items?
Right. If somebody voted yes, no, yes, that would still just go into the totals. And so going back to my original slide, if the first question, do you want a manager? If that's no, then the second and third ones don't matter at all. Whatever the vote was, even if those were both resoundingly yes, they don't matter because they're phrased in a way that is contingent upon there actually being a managerial form of government.
That's if they understand it. But if they vote yes, then those still go into the totals.
Not to be facetious, but the intent of a voter and what they have in their mind actually doesn't matter. And so, like, the clerk is not going to look at a yes, no, yes, and say that doesn't make any sense. They didn't understand that we're throwing that ballot out. They're just going to count the yeses and
Vote will
nos.
get counted no matter
Yes.
what order it's voted in.
Yes.
Okay, but if the first question is no, overall, then the other two don't matter.
The other two have no legal
But
effect.
but if someone voted no and then yes, yes, though their two yeses are still going to count if overall there's.
They would go into the piles of votes. Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
We have a question down here.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a very, I wouldn't say confusing, but a very complicated situation. I'm not ready to, I wouldn't be ready to vote on this tonight, obviously. This is way too big, in my opinion, for it to be voted on tonight, either here or, at the general council. I think we need to flush it out a little bit more, think about it a little bit more, maybe even educate, because once we decide to go forward with it on the ballot, then our educational process, so that we can do it, becomes a little bit more narrow, if I'm right, correct, Stu? Right now, you could talk to people a little bit more broadly about it, because we haven't had any action on it, correct?
Yes, once something is certified for the ballot, all of the provisions about electioneering, those kick in. Right now, it's all very theoretical. That is a good point.
So now you could do a lot of education before you put it on the ballot. You could, and once it gets certified and goes on the ballot, that becomes narrow. A little history lesson. If it goes sideways and you end up with, and for the first time in my life, it's going to be a little personal up here. My parents were the ones, and another group of people, that changed it from 18 to 8. They spent a ton of money and a ton of stress and time and went to court to get it done. Although I've been for the city manager, I got to make sure it's been educated and rolled out to the public. I'm not going to undo my parents and other people's work if things go sideways. Ultimately, I answer to the people, but ultimately I answer to my mother and father. So that's where I stand with this.
That's one of the reasons why I'm bringing this now, because it has to be on the ballot by January.
Correct.
And I think there needs to be discussion and education, and not just, oh, in December, we're going to roll this out. And, I want there to be talk about this, because, like I said, whether you're pro or not for this, there needs to be a process, and people need to be educated and be told and have.
One thing about this, too, there's a tenet of teaching, and maybe I fall back to that once in a while. It's not what I know. It's what I can get people to understand and do. And if they don't understand it and it goes sideways, yikes. Yikes. And none of us want that. None of us want it to go sideways either way. And is it the potential for it? Yeah. We would hope not, but again, once we decide to put it on the ballot, our ability here and other places becomes a little bit narrow on what we can do. Correct, Stu?
Like I said, you have to be careful that you are talking in terms of educating and informing the public and not advocating for people to vote one way or the other.
I have a question. Now, piggybacking off what he was saying, the last time we talked about city manager, we know that in the budget there was an issue about that. So if this change take place, how would it affect the budget for the city? If you can elaborate.
Yeah. So if the voters voted yes to move to a city manager form of government, the aldermen would need to do two things. They would need to amend the code to actually create the position. Like when you look at our code, there's a position for mayor, there's a position for clerk, there's a position for treasurer, there's a position for alderman, and a lot of other department heads. We don't have a position that creates the office of city manager or what their duties are. That's number one. You would need to add something to the code. And then number two, in Waukegan, we adopt a salary ordinance every year that establishes the salary for each position in the city. You would need to adopt either an amendment, or it may be time, you may just do it at the same time you adopt the regular salary ordinance, and you would need to include a city manager at that time. So two things, code amendment, salary ordinance.
Budget is a separate thing. And right now, we do have in our budget, we still have a city administrator on there that we have not filled. We will know the answer to this, that we could amend the budget for next year because the budget doesn't take effect until May 1st, and your vote would happen before that. So the budget is really irrelevant to this at this point.
One more point. just so people understand that I'm not being phony, is I had no idea, and people have known me for 20 years. I've always sort of tilted toward changing the form of government. I didn't know the other caveats came with it. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's why when I found out, I wanted to put this out there for us to look at this in total, because I think the public doesn't know that either.
No idea.
So I think, with everything can be overcome, but you need education, you need time to do that. And what I don't want to do as a mayor is put something on a December agenda and we not have had a chance to talk about this. So that's why it was put on tonight. When I found out how this would be affected, I think we need to have those discussions and then have a date that we're going to vote on this by, so that the public knows this is what's happening. But to me, it didn't seem fair to wait once I knew this, because I was not aware of all this either. So once I realized all that, that's why it immediately went on the agenda for us to kind of think this out a little bit more, because a city manager is one thing, but I think we want to make sure that if these other things are going to be affected, that there's a whole educational process that goes with that, so people truly understand what's going on.
Agreed, Mayor.
I have a question, one last question. I'm sorry. So I understand your point. Thank you so much. And not making you regurgitate this again, but why are we discussing this again and wanting this change again? Just in case individuals are asking. Reiterate.
Well, it's been something that's been discussed a lot in the community, and a lot of people have wanted a city manager. So, it's like we have to decide one way or the other. Are we going to do this? We put one toe in, we take one toe out. Like I said, if we're going to look at this, and we considered putting it on the referendum because we've talked about this, but now that we know all these other details, all of this has to be absorbed not only by us, but by the public. Everybody needs to understand that.
Can I add something to that, Mayor? I don't know that she would say this, but I will say, I know in my ward resoundingly supported this mayor. And the reason they did was because she said she was going to have a city manager. I feel one of the major differences between this mayor and the past mayor was she supported a city manager, he did not. And I have people coming to me all the time saying, why is there not a city manager? She promised us a city manager. Well, now you see it's a complicated process. But I feel the people who supported this mayor in my ward deserve to have the choice to put this on the ballot, and so they can vote for it. That's why I think we need to do it.
And that's a valid point, Alderman Florian. The people, as I said before, have the right to vote on this. That's ultimately the goal. It's their government, but they need to be informed. The other question I have, Stu, is could this be pushed to the next mayoral general election?
Why would we delay it, though?
It's a question.
I have to ask, why are we rushing?
It could mean instead of doing it now.
We haven't been rushing it. We've been doing it for a year.
Would you be better off to do it? Again, this is just a question, and thinking is, would it be on the next when the next mayoral election comes up? That would be on the ballot, so everybody that was running for mayor would know there's a chance that it may go to managerial. And the salary would be adjusted before that. If the council really wanted to go to a managerial form, the easiest way to do that is you would cut the mayor's salary. And you would.
But then you also have to decide, are you going to have a part-time mayor or a full-time mayor? I would tell you honestly, in a city this size, when you look at other cities comparatively, you have, whether you look at Elgin, Evanston, you're looking at places that have not only full-time mayors, but they also have a city manager and a deputy city manager. That's standard in what it takes to. The problem we have here is nobody understands the scope of the mayoral position, and that's why we've often had failure from the office. And some of that is that, as you can tell, you can't be in Springfield and running the city day to day and be in all the places you need to be. it's just physically not possible, and you're seeing that with other cities, why they don't do it. They do have those positions, and they also get the development. Development is hard to get when, one, you haven't been fiscally responsible, and two, when you don't have an infrastructure within your own city, staff that supports development coming to your city. So, like I said, it's been all sides on this, and that's why, I thought the voters should decide on this. But then when this part came up, I think we need to have that discussion. It doesn't matter whether you vote on it now or 2 years from now. If it's something you're going to do, you should just do it.
It was just a question.
Yeah.
Because that question was broached to me today. What if you waited till the next general mayoral election?
I mean, we could have, in
I don't
a
know.
sense, done it in November, but we weren't ready to do it in November. And I think at some point, there comes that thing that you just have to make the decision and do it, because are we going to do it 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Other cities did it 40 years ago. And,
But remember, Mayor, there was a question, though, just like when, let's make sure we get our terms right. City manager is what we're talking about on the ballot. City administrator was different.
And
People mix
yes,
those
there
terms
is.
up. We've done it up here, and that's another confusing point for people.
Right.
It's two different things.
It is.
And if I could say also, you have a chief of staff that does assist you a great deal of now, which allowed you to be in Springfield. So understanding city
there's not enough
managers,
time for me
chief
to
of
be in
staff,
Springfield.
you got administrator, we got all this going. So how would the system make it
And I
different?
don't want to get into a debate up here about that because that's been washed out. But one of the things that we did hear from people was if we hired a city administrator, we had them and yourself and the chief of staff all with a hefty salary. And that was a concern for people.
Has
Not me,
anybody?
but it was a concern for people.
Wait.
I'm sorry.
I'm done for now.
The only item that I would like to bring up is I think each council member needs to take a look at what other communities are doing and how other communities are structuring their administration. I think, we often talk about, you have, a mayor, you have a chief of staff, you have this, you have that. And I don't think we're privy to all the appointments and all the knowledge that the chief and the upper administration has to have in order for us to make a decision like that. We need to be in their shoes in order to make a decision like that. I would challenge council members up here. Take a look at Rockford. Take a look at their administration. Take a look at their budget. Take a look at what their mayor makes. Take a look at what their city administrator makes. Take a look at what their chief of staff makes. And this isn't something that just happened overnight. They've been working on this for quite a while. And to me, comparing myself to somebody like Waukegan to a Rockford, we're so behind. We truly are. Take a look at other communities and how they are structured and how they pay their administration to get the city's work done.
This is no different than when we look at our structure of any department. And how do we determine, how many deputy chiefs we should have, or how many, part of that is based on the need and the size of things. I mean, we all know here that we are an official community of 90,000 people. We are not servicing 90,000 people. We are servicing somewhere around 125,000. So we're not even being realistic about what the demands are when we're basing the numbers incorrectly. So we are a different size city in a sense than what we have even been officially allowed to have. If we're only getting credit for 90,000, but we have more, we are servicing all those people. And all those people get represented here in this city. Yes.
I guess my concern, Mayor, is that when we talked about a city administrator, we talked about going to a part-time mayor. Now we're talking about a full-time mayor plus a city manager a deputy city manager. So we're going to be top heavy. My concern is also is that anybody that's going to run for mayor should know what the responsibilities are. I don't apply for a job that I don't know clearly what the responsibilities and the time it takes to function. In the educational realm, when I was a teacher, which I still am, I looked at the dean, assistant principal, and principalship. It took more education and more time on the job. Plus the salary also was a little higher. I did not get paid what a teacher or a dean. So now with going towards looking at a managerial style, we're going to be paying close to, and I know that what we've talked about before in terms of look what the deputy chief makes, look what the chief of police make. But I think that it would behoove us to look at the next mayoral election to have enough for the public to hear about what is going on, and there's no electioneering going on. We talk about it. Here's the advantages, disadvantages, as Alderman Rivera talked about. You know, look at all those cities that are doing this. How are they benefiting from this form of government that we're going to enact? And you talked about Rockford. I'm going to check it out. Please. Okay? Because that's hometown. I was born there or raised there. So I'm going to find out what the advantages are. And I haven't lived there in almost 50 years. But certainly, if there are those communities, what has been the advantages? And certainly, I don't want it to be so that individuals, this is a community that is mixed between African Americans, Hispanics, and Europeans. I want to make sure we don't shut the door on a certain segment of our population by moving into a different form of government. Because
I'm not sure how that would shut the door on anybody.
okay, first of all, this was told to us on a Thursday in our briefings. We had no sense that this was coming. At least I didn't. Now, I don't know about the others.
No one else knew.
Okay,
I mean, this came
so
up.
all of a sudden it comes up. The chief of staff tells us he wasn't really clear on all the different points because there were some other things that we haven't mentioned that were brought up in our briefings. So that's my concern. I don't have a problem with putting it on the ballot, but I think that our public needs to understand what is really going on with this and how does it affect us in operating a city, as you say, 90,000, but certainly we're well over 100,000 residents in the city of Waukegan.
So I'll answer some of those questions. I don't think that when we even talked about a city administrator, we ever talked about a mayor ever being part-time. But that's something that can be defined. We can, you guys as legislators can define that. That's your job as legislators to define it. But if you're looking at it, you know, a statement that you said was, you know, the mayor has to know what they're kind of in a sense, if you're going to go into the next mayoral race, they need to know whether they're going to be part-time or full-time, whether they're going to, what kind of staff there's going to be there to support them and what's going to happen. So that's one of the reasons for doing this now, so that when the mayoral election does come up, people understand what is the position that you're actually running for. If you wait until the mayoral race, then it's okay, I think I'm doing this, and no, now I'm doing this. So I think it's just fair for everyone to kind of do it. We've talked about this. One of the reasons that I put this on the agenda was not for us necessarily to vote on this tonight, but to have these discussions, because again, I wasn't aware how this affected everything else. And when I became aware of that, I think you guys need to know that, because you're the legislators, you're the ones who have to understand this. It's not something that, you know, hey, we're doing this. It has to be put on the agenda that if you want to vote on it, you can. But we've already talked about holding this over, and that's fine. No one is trying to jam this down anybody's throats. This is just making informed decisions, and I don't think, we understood part 2 and part 3 of that. And that's why we're having the discussion.
Well, Mayor, I will tell you that in my session, we were told that we're going to be voting on this tonight. And only because, I received phone calls, and I said, no, we're supposed to be voting on this tonight. Now, I don't know how the other meetings took place, that they were not informed that we were going to be voting tonight, but that's what I got in my instructions, that we will be voting on this tonight. And then it changed.
Everything that goes on an agenda can be voted on that evening. But as all of us know, it's always an alderman's right to hold something over, which is what Alderman Mosio wanted to do.
Let's flush this out right now before we go to council in 3 or 4 minutes. Do we hold this in committee right now? Do we go to council? Do we set a date when we will vote on it? We have, Stuart, I'm looking at the calendar. You said it had to be done before January 2nd is our first council meeting.
I was going to ask the clerk, actually. I wasn't sure if it was the 2nd or the...
And then
it was the 2nd or the 9th.
It has to be before the 15th of January, which is a Sunday, so the 16th would be a no-go.
Yep.
I'm just
So,
looking at the drop
Yeah.
dead date, and then we could work backwards from there.
We're just putting it together now, but I think it might be the
yeah. The second is the first Monday in January.
January 3rd.
January
Okay.
3rd, because the 2nd is,
Okay, yeah, what I didn't know, I wasn't sure. Okay, so it would be basically the first, regardless, the first city council meeting in January would be the last opportunity for the city council to vote to put this on the ballot for the voters to make a decision on it.
my fellow council members, do we lock that date in, or do we go before that?
I think go before.
What is the hurry?
What's the, it does.
We're going to,
Public
public comment for this committee is right after they make their motion.
It still gives, whether it's December or January, what's the consensus on that?
I'm going to say January.
I say January.
Does it matter?
I would advise that if there's going to be more discussion and if you had questions, that you would not hold this to the last minute.
I think it should come back in committee in December, the beginning of December, for discussion and answer more questions, because I think there's going to be several rounds of questions on this.
And then at that time, we'll make a decision when we'll either do it, was that the first meeting in December?
Okay. If
we
you'd
keep
like
it-
to, you can even bring it back in committee next time and have more discussion.
I
if
agree
you
with
need.
that. I
So
think
we're
we keep
saying
the
bring it back
conversation
into
going, Mayor, and if
committee.
you don't mind if I just jump in,
Nope,
I just want
fine.
to make a quick comment here. The education starts now.
Yes.
Actually, it started when the mayor ran, and then it started when we voted on this the first time, and everybody kept saying that they didn't know, and everyone needed more time to educate their constituents, and they were getting phone calls about this or that. You have had months, if not years, to educate people. It's going to come to a vote. I would encourage you to start that process now. If you're not in favor of it, or if you're just going to sit there and say, what's the hurry, then just come out and say you're not in favor of it, and you're not going to take the time to educate people. Otherwise, we should do what it is we're elected to do, which is to go out, knock on doors, tell people what they're going to be voting on, explain to them the language that they're going to see in the referendum, and do what it is they pay us to sit here and do, which is make hard decisions, be leaders. So this is a topic that has been discussed many, many times. You can throw all the red herrings you want about it being top heavy. It's a city of 500 employees. 3 people at the top does not make us top heavy. We just approved tonight, without batting an eye, a $100,000 salary for a temporary employee. No one even looked up from their microphones. But now you want to flag the cost of a city manager. So if you're going to contradict yourself, I would just say be very careful about it, because we're going to have a lot of debates. I think it should come up at every meeting. I think it should be talked about as often as possible, and this is where the education starts, but this is not where it ends, because hardly anybody watches this at home, and let even fewer people come to the meetings. So we need to go out. If you want to talk about educating, you have to go out, you have to take the time, you got to knock on doors, you got to answer the phone. And I'm going to say that every week, because that's the only way it's going to get done.
So we'll put it on the committee every meeting until we make that vote in January. Is that where, that opens the door that if you want to discuss, you can. If you don't, you can just sit there. You don't have to say anything. But I think to be fair to everybody, that's kind of the best way to go about it. And then the vote should probably happen no later than the second meeting in December. Okay. Okay.
So to do this then, it would be appropriate then to have a motion to continue the discussion on this to the next code revisions, negotiations, and appeals committee, which could be scheduled, that's scheduled on an as-needed basis.
So moved.
And that could be at the next council meeting, which would be November.
November 7th. November 7th.
Yes. Okay.
So we will have this on November 7th. Alderman Mozio, you made the first.
Yes. Seconded.
Second by Alderman Hayes. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Hayes.
For voting to hold it over, or to
Voting
continue
to
the discussion.
continue the discussion on this in committee
Then
at
aye.
the first meeting in November, and not putting it on a main meeting agenda until there's a vote for out of the committee.
Aye.
Yeah.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Mozio. Alderman Seeger.
Aye.
Mayor Taylor.
Aye. At this time, I will take public comment. Did we have a sign-up sheet?
On this.
No, go to the microphone,
Yeah,
please.
we want you on the tape.
Okay. I appreciate y'all bringing this up to the council, but I have to say this. Y'all can't be serious if y'all think y'all finna educate 100,000+ people in 2 months. You can't be serious. Not one alderman up here can tell me they can go on their ward in 2 months and educate these people about this here process. It's not possible. You got Thanksgiving coming, you got Christmas. It's a holiday season. These people ain't watching this meeting. And I campaigned with this mayor. So yes, we did talk about a city manager, but we didn't talk about changing the aldermen and all of this. That was never a part of the thing. We also didn't talk about having no mayor full-time. We talked about if there's a city manager, the mayor will go part-time. Y'all are investing all of this money in more government, but we lacking police officers. We got killings all over the place. Y'all steady hiring, steady hiring, steady hiring, and we're dying out here. There ain't enough police officers to even run a proper shift. But see, y'all wouldn't know that because a lot of violence don't go on in y'all communities. A lot of y'all communities don't see, touch, or smell violence. And then when it do happen in y'all community, y'all get every resource possible. We don't. And as somebody that ran hard as hell for this campaign, and I did, and I think a lot of y'all up here know I did. I actually did more work than a lot of the candidates. I'm sitting up here and I'm baffled at how y'all conquering this, how y'all putting these words together. Look at the budget. Look at how much money you're going to be spending. You want to invest in more people? Invest in these kids. Invest in the future, the next aldermen, the next mayors, the next firemen, the next policemen. Y'all don't do that, though. You haven't done it. Not one time. You talking about education? I was told when we got this new administration, we was going to have town halls. When? Where? Because they haven't been had. Nowhere. I haven't seen them. I've asked for them. You start an intergovernment committee. Y'all meet once every 4 months. What is that going to do? Have any of y'all realized that we had a new norm? That ain't nothing how it used to be? That COVID has destroyed our world and our lives? That people out here hurting? But a lot of y'all wouldn't know that because y'all are a part of this community, but y'all are not members of this community. And you know why? Because you wouldn't understand some of the stress and struggle that a lot of these people go through in these communities. Y'all get up here and y'all do a simple thing and then y'all want to rush the meeting. What you rushing for?
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
This is nuts.
Just want to clarify one thing, is that the actual vote, when the voters would vote, would not be in January, it would be in April.
Even in April, Sue, as you clarified, and I'm going to go back at you, that's still not enough time to educate 100,000 plus people. You know that. Y'all already put agenda items on here that people don't understand.
Edwards, we heard. Thank you. Thank you.
But he went back with me.
Sadly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't worry about it. Y'all get ready for an election because it's going to be a hard fight. Everybody that's on the ballot. I promise you that.
Mr. McLemore?
This is a joke. I just want to say this here. Waukegan, back about in the 70s, in the 80s, they had this. They had this where they, the top aldermen get in a vote. If every alderman, let's say, I'm going to pick on you, Ann, you from Ward 9, right? District 9, Ward 9. If 5 people from Ward 9 run for alderman, and then everybody else run for alderman, and them 5 people get the most votes, that would be the alderman. So they took that away. It didn't work. Why are we going back? Why would we even suggest something like that, go back? Slavery, it made America great again, but we don't have to go back to slavery, so why would we go back to something that it didn't work then, and what makes you think it's going to work now? The city administrator was already voted down, but y'all gonna keep trying to flush this to people. The budget was out there, but the administrator was voted down. Now, I'm going to give you a story. Back when Harold Washington was the mayor, they had Republican aldermen, and they didn't like a black man running the city. So they did that. They took the nonpartisan out of it, right? So a black man could never be mayor again. That worked for 30 years. Until last election. Y'all got to come on, man. Wake up. Y'all are legislators. Y'all are leaders. Lead. Do your work. Mayor, you was elected. I campaigned for you. Do your job as a mayor. You don't need nobody to help you. The way you running things, you're not gonna get no money in Springfield. So what you gotta go to Springfield for? All you gonna do is hang on the rail, and they ain't gonna really give you nothing because you're not voting with them. You had Darren Bailey here in the city council. You think the governor gonna give you something? What you need to do is hire somebody to go down there and lobby for you. You keep your face out of it. Because there's pictures out here floating with you and Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. Thank you.
With there being no more public comment, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, did you get that?
No.
Okay. Alderman Mozio, second by Alderman Bolton.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
We can just,
We can do all voice. All those in favor.
all right.
I'm going to give you a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene.
Thank you.